For Meghan Markle, it's all going humiliatingly wrong. Overshadowed by her sworn royal enemies and facing business bankruptcy, the difficult Duchess is struggling to put a positive spin on her disastrous downhill spiral as it rapidly accelerates.
The story that started it all. The story that opened the doors at the United Nations, at the One Young World Summit, at Vanity Fair, at every major platform that ever gave her a seat at the table. Two people who were never supposed to agree on anything just agreed on everything. That is where this story begins. Not with a leaked document. Not with a palace statement. Not with another headline cycling through the royal gossip machine. It begins with an alliance that nobody saw coming between two people whose entire history should have made it impossible, and what that alliance is now preparing to do to the Sussex brand, to the titles, to the commercial operation built on top of them, and to the woman at the center of all of it. We are not talking about rumors tonight. We are not talking about tabloid sources and palace whispers and anonymous briefings that could mean anything or nothing. We are talking about a signed agreement, documented violations, collapsed industries, 18 people who walked out, and a legal mechanism with a name and a process that does not require anyone's cooperation to complete. That is what tonight is about. Prince William and Camilla. Together. Aligned. Working from the same file, toward the same outcome, with the kind of quiet institutional patience that does not announce itself until the moment it does not have to. Think about what that actually means. Camilla, who spent decades being the most scrutinized woman in the royal family, who rebuilt her reputation brick by brick across 20 years of public skepticism, who finally stepped into the role of queen consort with a dignity that silenced most of her critics. And William, who has spent the years since the Sandringham split watching, waiting, saying almost nothing publicly, while building toward the moment when the crown passes to him and with it the power to act. These two people, from completely different chapters of royal history, looking at the same evidence and arriving at the same conclusion. That conclusion has a name. It has a mechanism. And before this story is finished, you will understand exactly what it means for everything Meghan Markle has built since January 2020. But first, we need to go back to that month.
Shocking new developments in the growing war behind the scenes in the British royal family over Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, Archie and Lily's return to the UK next month, with new reports that Prince William is fuming.
January 2020. Sandringham Estate. Because nothing that follows makes sense without understanding what was agreed to in that room, in those specific words, on that specific day, with the late Queen Elizabeth present and in agreement. The Sandringham Agreement is not a rumour. It is not a palace insider's interpretation of events. It is a document. It is published on the official royal website. It has been sitting there since January 2020 and you can pull it up right now. The terms are not vague. They are not open to creative reading. The Sussex titles, Duke and Duchess, they keep. In exchange, the Her Royal Highness designation, those two words, Your Royal Highness, are surrendered. Not reduced. Not paused. Surrendered. Not to be used publicly. Not commercially. Not in any context. Both parties signed it. The late Queen approved it. It was, by every measure, a clean exit. They walked away with their dignity, their titles, and their future in their own hands. That was the deal. Hi viewers. I want to ask you something personal before we go any further. When someone gives up everything to be with the person they love and it all falls apart, do you think they knew from the beginning it would end this way, or did they genuinely believe it would work? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one.
King Charles rolls out the red carpet for Prince Harry. Is this a betrayal of Prince William? Who better to ask than Sarah Louise Robertson?
Now, back to the agreement. Because the agreement is only the beginning. The agreement is the foundation. And what was built on top of that foundation, the deals, the brand, the platform, the products, the identity, all of it rests on the assumption that the terms of that document would be honored. That the two words surrendered in that room in January 2020 would stay surrendered. They did not. And here is what makes this moment different from every other chapter of the Sussex story. Every previous controversy could be framed as a misunderstanding, a miscommunication, a diplomatic incident caused by someone else's wording or a foreign dignitary's protocol. Every previous headline had a counter-narrative available. Not this time. This time, William and Camilla are not reacting to a headline. They are building a case. Quietly. Methodically. With the kind of institutional patience that has outlasted every opponent the royal family has ever faced. The palace does not move fast. It does not need to. It simply waits until the evidence is undeniable, and then it acts with a precision that leaves no room for reinterpretation. The evidence, as we are about to go through together, is now undeniable. 3 violations of the Sandringham Agreement. 18 documented staff departures. The collapse of $100 million in industry deals. An origin story that Vanity Fair could not verify and that Meghan's own father called embellished. And a legal mechanism, letters patent, that will eventually settle the entire question of what the Sussex brand is actually built on, and what happens to it when that foundation is officially and permanently removed. That is what William and Camilla are holding. And that is what Meghan is unraveling against. But before we get to what is in that file, before we get to the violations and the collapsed deals and the legal mechanism that changes everything, we need to talk about the story Meghan has been telling the world for 20 years.
There are even reports that, for the first time since running away 6 years ago, Manic Meg is planning a shock return to Britain with Harry and the kids. Is she poised to lob a disruptive media grenade just to try to trigger a reversal of fortunes? Anything to grab a few column inches? Anything to get people talking about her? Is it even true?
Because that story, the very first story she ever told about herself publicly, the cornerstone of the entire Meghan Markle brand, did not survive a fact check. And it gets worse than that. It did not survive her own father. She was 11 years old. That is how the story always begins. 11 years old, sitting in front of a television in Los Angeles, watching a Procter & Gamble commercial that said women all over America were fighting greasy pots and pans. And according to Meghan, something ignited in her. Outrage. Purpose. The specific kind of clarity that most adults spend their entire lives searching for, and this child supposedly found it at 11, in a living room in LA, watching a dish soap advertisement. So she picked up a pen. She wrote to Hillary Clinton. She wrote to senators. She wrote to Procter & Gamble directly. And according to the story she has told for 2 decades, it worked. The commercial was changed. Clinton personally wrote back. An 11-year-old girl, alone, with a pen and a piece of paper, changed corporate America. She told this story at the United Nations. She told it at the One Young World Summit. She told it in her Vanity Fair profile. She told it again in Colombia in 2024. For 20 years, across some of the most prestigious stages on the planet, this was the foundation. This was the origin. This was the proof that Meghan Markle was not just an actress who married into royalty. She was someone who had always been destined for more. Someone who saw injustice and acted. Someone the world should listen to. There is one problem.
William's not happy about this, is he?
He is furious. This feels like a real letdown from the king to his eldest son, Prince William. The fact that the king has allowed Harry and Meghan to manoeuvre their way almost back to the inner royal sanctum.
Vanity Fair's own fact-checkers went looking for the evidence. They went directly to Procter & Gamble. They consulted advertising historians. They searched for any record of a personal reply from Hillary Clinton's office. Any letter. Any confirmation. Any trace of a lone 11-year-old girl who moved a corporation to change its advertising. What they found, or more precisely, what they could not find, was enough for them to pull the story from the article entirely. Gone. Removed. Not because it was old. Because it could not be verified. No letter from Clinton. No record at Procter & Gamble. No advertising historian who could confirm the commercial was changed because of a child's letter-writing effort. Nothing. 2 decades of telling the story. And not one piece of evidence to support the version she had been telling it. Then her own father spoke. Thomas Markle. In his 2020 documentary. On camera. Not as an enemy, not as a man trying to burn his daughter down, but as a father remembering what actually happened. His words were careful. Almost gentle. He said he thought Meghan was part of a letter-writing campaign of sorts. That the story about her single-handedly changing the ad may have been a little embellished. A letter-writing campaign. In school. As a class assignment. Not a lone activist. Not a girl who changed corporate America. A student doing homework. Let that land for a moment. Because this is not a tabloid allegation. This is not a rival's account. This is her own father, on camera, in his own words, describing the origin story of the entire Meghan Markle brand as something that got embellished. And then her own PR team, the people paid to protect her reputation, the people who understood her brand better than anyone, made a specific and deliberate choice to stop including the Procter & Gamble story in official press material sent to media outlets. Not because the story had aged out of relevance. Because it had become a liability to circulate. Think about what that decision means. It means the people closest to her, the people with access to the truth, concluded that a story she had been telling publicly for 20 years, a story she used to earn a United Nations platform, a story that formed the foundation of her entire humanitarian identity, was no longer safe to repeat in official materials. That is a specific kind of silence. And specific silences always mean something. Now. Here is where the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Because the same thing that happened to the origin story happened to the people who got too close to the woman telling it. There is an entry in the Urban Dictionary now. The word is mauled. It means to be completely abandoned by someone after you have played a meaningful role in their life. The fact that a dictionary entry exists because the pattern is that recognizable, that consistent, that widely observed, tells you something no single story could tell you alone. Monarchy pretty. She and Meghan met at age 2. 2 years old. They grew up inseparable. Sleepovers. Road trips. A European holiday at 15. The kind of friendship that does not need maintenance because it simply exists underneath everything else. In 2011, when Meghan married Trevor Engle's son, Monarchy was her maid of honor. She stood beside her. She was there through the marriage. She was there through the divorce. 30 years of shared history between two people who had known each other almost their entire lives. She was not invited to the royal wedding in 2018. No confrontation. No falling out. No final conversation where at least you would know what happened and why. Just silence. The specific kind of silence that is harder to process than a direct ending because it does not give you anything to respond to. It simply removes you. Cleanly. Completely. Without the basic acknowledgement that 30 years deserved, at minimum, a conversation. When Monarchy eventually spoke, years later, she used the language of someone who had thought about it for a very long time. She said she believed Meghan was calculated. Very calculated in the way she handled people and relationships. That once Meghan decided you were no longer part of her life, she could be very cold. 30 years. And then nothing. Jessica Mulrooney. 9 years. Stylist, confidant, the woman described by multiple sources as Meghan's most trusted inner circle. She was at the royal wedding. She was at the baby shower. She went on royal tours. She navigated the media storm of the early Harry years alongside Meghan, closer than almost anyone. Then in June 2020, Mulrooney got into a public dispute with a black influencer. Meghan cut contact immediately. A source told Page 6 that the controversy gave Meghan the excuse she was apparently waiting for, to cut Mulrooney off for good. 9 years. Ended the moment it became a liability. Piers Morgan. 2016, Meghan followed him on social media. They exchanged messages. They met for a drink in London. That same evening, she met Harry at a party. Morgan described what happened next with a simplicity that required no elaboration at all. That was the last he ever heard from Meghan Markle. 3 people. 3 clean cuts. No explanations. No conversations. No acknowledgement that the years shared between them deserved anything more than silence. These are not people who betrayed her first. They were left first. Quietly. Without warning. Without the conversation that 30 years of childhood friendship or 9 years of close professional trust surely warranted. And when they finally spoke, they did not speak like people selling a story. They spoke like people who had spent years trying to understand something that did not make obvious sense, and had eventually arrived at a conclusion they were not looking for. That pattern, the clean cut, the sudden silence, the removal without explanation, did not stay in her personal life. It walked straight into her professional one. 18 times.